Well, I must say, this is probably the largest crowd we've ever had to come speak at the Historical Society, so I'm really excited to see this many people here. I don't know if it's Diana's fan club, or if y'all just want to know more about the White River Monster. This is awesome. I appreciate so much for you coming there. Obviously, you know Diana. I've known her for years and years, and her husband and I even graduated from high school many years ago. So I'm real excited, and when I was talking, always need topics for, to come talk to the Historical Society, and I talked with her 2-3 months ago, and she said, "Yeah, have you ever heard of Whitey?" And I'm like, "No." So here we have Dianna Roller, so come talk about the legends of the White River Monster.
Yay.
Here's the attendance thing. I don't know how that goes.
Yeah, silence your cell phones.
Yeah, I just did.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I see so many familiar faces, some not so familiar, but I'm very happy that you all decided to come tonight. I am a native of Arkansas, but I was born in the northeast part of the state, in Jackson County, which the largest town in Jackson County is Newport. But I've lived in Mountain Home since 1976. I am a retired school teacher, but I've always had an interest in history. So I did a program, I think it was in 2015, on ghost towns of Arkansas for the Historical Society. So it's been a while since I've done this. I may be a little rusty. But our program tonight is the White River Monster. The White River Monster is one of Arkansas's premier mysteries. Along the White River near Newport in Jackson County, the monster has appeared several times and has become a local legend. Okay, first of all, we're going to do a little background information on the town of Newport. Newport is about 120 miles downstream from here, and historically it was just a small little delta town, a farming town. Its residents survived by farming soybeans and cotton and rice, and they also did some logging. So loggers, trappers, and boatmen lived in Newport and thrived in Newport. The appearance of the White River around Newport is not like it is up here. It's brownish and murky, and that is due to a lot of the soil eroding and going into the river when it rains, and it's a lot flatter down there, so it has to run somewhere. It's not as cold down there, so it is more temperate, and the people in Newport have always played in the river, swam, boated, fished, but it's not crystal clear like it is up here. There are sand beaches and sandbars, so recreation on the river has always been going on. This is a vintage photo of the Jackson County Courthouse. It's located at Main and 3rd Street, built in 1892, and is one of the state's oldest courthouses. The photo to your left at the top is an aerial view of the town of Newport in wintertime. And I think that looks like a painting, a pastoral type scene. Whoops, too far. Okay. Then there's the train depot. The Newport station is also known as the Missouri Pacific Depot Newport, and it's a historic railway station at Walnut and Front Streets. The building was built in 1904 by the Missouri Pacific Railroad.
It's better with that light.
It was fun with the light off.
Is it better for Diana?
Oh, I can see, yeah, thank
Okay.
you. Newport's daily rail traffic at its highest, there you go, included 23 trains stopping at the city's Iron Mountain Depot. Service to Newport was ended on April 14th, 1996, and here you see the Union Pacific number 8444 coming down the tracks. Another aspect of Newport was the airfield. It was called Irwin Auxiliary Army Airfield, and it is a former World War II era airfield. The site now is being used for agriculture. The airfield is located a little south of the city. It has 2 runways which form an X shape. The airfield was built in 1942 as an auxiliary to the main Army airfield at Newport, which is now Newport Municipal Airport, and was used for training and military exercises. It was briefly reactivated in 1946 through 49, but was definitely abandoned sometime before 1964. Commerce was concentrated along Front Street, and that's a shot of Front Street on your left. There you go. There was an assortment of hotels, saloons, banks, an opera house, and stores. The farmers from all the surrounding communities would come into town to conduct business, usually on Saturdays. So it was a busy, busy place. Also, here you see a train load of cotton. Most of the farmers in the Newport area were not huge landowners. They were small farmers, owning just a few hundred acres or less. There were a few farmers that you could call plantation owners, and they had several hundred acres up to maybe 1,000 acres or something like that. The plantation owners had small houses on their land for the sharecroppers to live in. The White River in years long ago had ferries to help people get across the river, and there were ferries in several locations. And then also we have a barge here that carried goods up and down the river to be sold or stored. Grain, gravel, and sand were some of the products transported in this manner. It was a pretty active road thoroughfare with the river, boats going up and down. That began to decline as things progressed. Progress brought bridges, so some of the river traffic was diverted to the roadways. And it was the beginning of the decline of the town and the decline of transporting goods on the river. Another contributing factor was when the railroad was built, so a lot of what was going to be carried on the river started being carried by rail. So now we're going to get to what you came to hear about, the White River Monster, a folklore story. Hopefully most of it is fact. We'll see what you think. The first documented case of something strange in the river actually dates from December of 1912. Timber workers floating rafts of cedar on the White River below Branson, Missouri, had seen something large and strange on the bottom of the river. At first they thought it was a boulder, but then they became convinced it was a gigantic turtle. They had estimated that it weighed about 300 pounds. The report of the big river monster created quite a sensation among the sportsmen of the Branson area. Tom Brainerd, you may be familiar with that name, was one of the local anglers at that time. He organized a party to go and capture the giant turtle. Realizing it would not be possible to gig it, as they normally would do some things like that, they took a number of strong ropes to loop over the turtle and land it in that manner. Needless to say, it didn't work out. It was not successful. But it started the idea that there's something around. The next sighting was in 1915, but there's not a lot of information about that. Local farmers at that time began filing reports of a large unknown creature off the banks of the White River. There were also sightings in 1917 and several sightings in the 20s. Then you wouldn't think that the river monster would have anything to do with the Civil War, but as strange and as incredible as it may sound, it's believed by some that the White River Monster may have played a role in the war between the states. Like other waterways, the White River was used for transporting people and goods during the war. Legends hold that the White River Monster is responsible for sinking a Confederate gunship. I thought he would be I didn't think he would be a Union guy. Details about the alleged sinking are scarce. There's little, if any, information to validate the claim of the sinking, and nothing in the historical records indicates that a strange creature of any sort had acted aggressively toward the gunboat. Although it cannot be substantiated, and it's probably just a tall tale, it's an interesting story. It's further proof that rivers and lakes and what lurks beneath them have always fascinated mankind. So there's a newspaper article about the monster and some of his activities, and over here, this is actually advertising a podcast about the White River Monster. Still, the Civil War stories, they're the cryptic Civil War. It talks about the monster overturning the boat, and then it talks about a couple of more sightings. We'll talk about those later. But here it lists his nickname is Whitey. First seen in 1915, but that's not exactly true if you count the Branson story in 1912, and then there may be earlier things. But the cryptozoological explanation, and you can see a photo over here, which is pretty blurry and you can't tell much about it, but there may be a little hump or something there, is that Whitey might be a descendant of the Zaphactinus. This is the Zaphactinus. It's an extinct, large predatory fish, 15 to 20 feet long. The fish in its day would have resembled a gargantuan fanged tarpon. It's a pretty unlikely possibility that this would be able to survive in the fresh water of the White River rather than the salt water of the ocean where it used to roam. And of course it was extinct, so there's no way unless it would be a descendant of this or something like that. Another legend is from the Quapaw tribe. This was in the 1890s, so that's even earlier than what they normally say was the first sighting. According to legend, taking sides during the Civil War wasn't the only time that the White River Monster had been responsible for capsizing a boat. The original inhabitants of the area, the Quapaw Indians, have handed down a legend for many generations of a brave's canoe being flipped over by the monster. The monster is said to have flipped the unsuspecting young man's canoe and then just slipped back into the water. But then we really come to the exciting time, 1937, July the 1st. This was the most excitement. A local plantation owner named Bramlett Bateman reported seeing a gray-skinned creature in the river, which was wide as a car and 3 cars long. Bateman also described the creature as having the skin of an elephant, 4 or 5 feet wide by 12 feet long, with the face of a catfish. So he was accompanied by County Deputy Z.B. Reed during one of the sightings, and there's a little area up there, I can't really reach, but kind of below the gray it says Bateman, so it's a little curve on the river where his farm was located. But at least 12 reputable citizens bore out Bateman's discovery. They backed him up. The story spread across the United States, and a Trenton, New Jersey newspaper carried the story of an effort to snag the beast. Even without being able to capture the monster became the monster of the year in newspapers all around the country. So it really took off. I don't know if it was because it was such a sensational story or because it was a slow news time. But Newport residents fashioned a big rope net in the hope of being able to snare the mysterious monster, whose presence in a 60-foot deep White River eddy had frightened plantation worker D. Wyatt. W.E. Penix was the state toll bridge collector, and he directed the net-making activities. He ordered the net to be constructed 40 feet long and 15 feet wide with meshes of 6 or 8 inches. He estimated it would require a week or 10 days to complete the net, and said a convoy of motorboats would sweep the eddy with it. Some described the eddy as a bottomless pit, although most that I saw said it was probably 60 feet. Needless to say, this net thing, again, did not work. Bateman also had a plan to use TNT and to blow the monster up. But local Game and Fish Commission authorities would not allow it. They said, no, that is against the law. People continued to show up along the banks of the river to try to catch a glimpse of the monster. Some who arrived brought dynamite along with them. And one observer actually arrived toting a machine gun. In those days, shallow draft tugs, snag boats, called snag boats, prowled the river system, removing logs, stumps, and miscellaneous debris from navigational channels. the Town Council of Newport solicited the federal government to send such a boat to investigate and aid in the capture attempt. Captain Jack Carter of the U.S. snag boat named Tom Stallings, having not yet visited the site, declared that they had talked about bubbles coming up in the eddy, and he said that the presence of bubbles meant that there certainly were caused by some living object. So to him, that meant that there was something down there that was alive. The news of the attempt to capture the monster with a homemade net garnered nationwide attention. The net project would eventually be canceled due to lack of money and materials. It's doubtful that this attempt would have been successful even if the project had been able to go forward. Eventually, the sightings tapered off and the excitement and hysteria waned. Bateman was accused by many of creating a hoax that local officials willingly participated in, if it was a hoax, because it brought attention and an infusion of cash into the economically depressed area. However, even though attempts to capture the beast were unsuccessful, over that 3-month period, July, August, and September of 1937, there were over 100 reported sightings. So whether there was a water monster in Newport or there was just an incredible case of mistaken identity, one thing is clear: locals were definitely seeing something. This was in 37 when all the Bateman excitement started, and when all of that was being talked about, a Little Rock woman came up with a story and said that she had seen the monster. Her name was Ethel Smith, 13 years earlier, so that would have been 1924. She was vacationing with her husband and children in the area, and the elements of her description matched with those of others. It was making a loud blowing noise, but never did show its head or tail. It was a terrible looking thing with dingy gray crusted hide. It frightened her badly. As was common, the creature appeared following a widening ring of bubbles and thrashed about for 5 minutes or more before re-submerging. It left in its wake many open-mouthed eyewitnesses. 6 days later, it went out over the Associated Press that a river bottom walker was going after the monster. Hired by the local Chamber of Commerce, Charles B. Brown of the U.S. Engineers Office in Memphis reported that he was going to dive, but he didn't expect to encounter anything dangerous in the White River, but would carry along a razor-edged 8-foot giant harpoon just in case. I think he was a Navy SEAL, a retired Navy SEAL. Things did not go well for Brown, and here's a couple of newspaper articles that were published when he was doing his dive. One dive lasted 75 minutes. The water was murky due to recent rains. 3 times he went into the 60-foot deep water of the mysterious eddy by the Bateman farm. He got stuck in deep silt and had to be pulled out with ropes. Then there was a problem with an air valve that caused his rubberized dive suit to fill with air and send him bobbing to the surface. The 3rd time wasn't a charm either. After an hour of poking around in the weeds and mud of the river bottom, Brown was pulled to the surface to report that he had seen only a catfish and a dead log. His visibility was only a few inches. The Newport Chamber of Commerce, meanwhile, had set up a fence, and they were charging 25 cents per person to watch the dive to look for the monster. The local Chamber of Commerce moved into high gear. They saw this as an opportunity. Newport declared an unofficial holiday. Signs were posted on roads throughout the region saying, "This way to the White River Monster." Invitations were sent out to newspapers throughout the region. Stores in town were closed. Hundreds of people, estimated at 500 or more, gathered along the river banks to watch the dives. Farmer Bateman got in on the act too. He set up a concession and sold barbecued goat sandwiches and cold beverages. Loudspeakers were installed. Newspaper reports indicate that people came from as far away as California. And reporters noted that the community received a much-needed infusion of cash in the hard times of the Great Depression. There was a temporary dance area set up for the spectators to be entertained between the dives. You know, you gotta have something to do. They called it a monster dance. Flickering lights were present well into the night. Hundreds of people viewed from the opposite side of the river, those who did not think it was worth it to pay 25 cents. So they're on the other side of the river, but it's only about 75 feet away. Interest in the dive and his not being able to find anything quickly waned and the crowds melted away. But probably the most interesting thing seen in the river that weekend, in fact, was not the White River Monster, but the homemade dive apparatus of a local pearl diver named David Smith. Apparently inspired, he built his own diving gear from an old gasoline tank, rubber hose, and bicycle pump manned from a boat. He had no more luck than his professionally equipped rival. Pearl diving, though, which is what his profession was a major industry in both the White and the Black River in this area. So here is a picture of a pearl diving camp, and those camps were set up along the river. The city was the center for the pearl button business. They would dive for the mussels. Thousands of mussel shells were harvested each week from the White and the Black Rivers. By the 1930s, there were 200 button cutters working in Newport. But as time went on, plastics replaced what buttons were made of, and that killed the industry. Other sightings continued throughout the summer. And here's some pictures of flooding in the area. And years ago, it flooded a lot more than it does now, but it still does flood occasionally. Flooding has improved since the construction of the dams on the White River, but it can still be a problem. The monster was exhibiting a predictable pattern of behavior, surfacing late in the afternoons and staying up 5 to 15 minutes at a stretch before submerging again. But there seemed to be a lot of sightings in close connection with when we were having a flood. So far, this is the description that we have of Whitey. This was reported from eyewitnesses. Gray, elephant-like skin appeared to be peeling all over, smooth type of skin or flesh, bone protruding from the forehead, a spiny, ridged backbone 30 to 40 feet long, wide as a car and 3 cars long, the size of a boxcar, weighing over a ton. So weights vary from 300 to 1,000 pounds or over, what people see. The length of 3 to 4 pickup trucks. The noise it made was a cross between a cow's moo and a horse's neigh. And Whitey tends to reappear about every 40 years, so we haven't seen him in a long time. It's about time for him to come back. The next major development came on July 5th, 1971, when the county sheriff reported finding strange footprints on Towhead Island just north of Bateman Eddy. He said they were 14 inches long and 8 inches wide with 3 long toes or claws and a spur of some kind projecting from the heel. CBS News sent a film crew. There was evidence that a creature of enormous size and weight had moved across the land. There were the footprints, but there were also trees that were bent and bushes crushed. They could see where he came out of the river, went a little way down the shoreline, and then back into the river. Mr. Bateman was still around at the 1970s sighting, but refused to be interviewed by CBS. Don't know why. So one other sighting in the summer was by a fisherman and his grandson who said something large had come up under their boat. Curiously, once again, the sightings took place following heavy floods along the White River. In June and July of 1971, sightings began again, and report of the sightings and the huge tracks found had brought these two out on the river. I don't know, Richardson and Dupree, I know it's Joey Dupree. Do you know who the Richardson was, Joe?
I don't.
Joey was
He
a young...
He was a guy. Richardson was a guy. Dupree's our...
Okay. So Richard and Dupree hoped to see the monster and solve the mystery that had been in the town of Newport since 1915. They were cruising the river and had seen nothing, but suddenly, with a thump, their boat hit something. They and their craft seemed to move straight up. The pair realized that they were on the back of the creature. Fortunately, the incident ended without injury to either the boaters or the monster. Richardson and Dupree said they never got a clear view of the animal, but the two had a frightening memory that neither would forget for a very long time. The most widely reported of these began in 1971 when Newport resident David Jenks reported seeing a large creature in the river that he described as being gray and long with a pointy bone protruding from its head. He thought it weighed about 1,000 pounds. This is just a picture of driftwood. But you can, if the river was at a certain level and the waves were going, you know, it's possible that you would see that and think it was something else. I just thought it was a neat picture. Okay. 2 days later, on June 28th, 1971, a man named Clovis Warren produced a photograph of the monster. And there it is.
Well, that's good.
Do you see that? Okay. It appears to show some kind of a hump floating in the river. The search was on once again, but there has never been a photograph with a clear view of the monster. Mr. Warren, a local lumber company employee, sold the picture to the Newport Daily Independent. Here's another shot. Warren claimed that while fishing with 2 others, they noticed the eruption of water and 20-foot-long creature with a spiny backbone swimming away. But before the monster disappeared, he was able to snap this photograph. So you can just see some splashes on the left-hand side of the photograph there. But again, very fuzzy. The Polaroid photo that was taken was fuzzy, giving no real proof of the monster. Some say that you can make out a hump, while others claim that nothing definitive can be made out. This in the water, I mean, to me, the head looks like one of the giant turtles, like maybe they saw in Branson in 1912, and the tail sticking up, but, you know, who knows. So here, at best, the photos are inconclusive, and unfortunately, the Newport Daily Independent lost the original photo, making it impossible for researchers to perform scientific analysis on it. So, there's a wake supposedly in that picture and a strange object, but I don't really see it. Okay. There's another river shot. So find the monster if you can. I'm not sure. Do you see a shadow? Okay. Could all of this hoopla and media frenzy be a hoax? Some thought a hoax was a possibility, but most feel that the people were seeing something, but it just could not be identified or captured. Could what people saw be a hallucination? Whitey, as the monster is nicknamed, seems to be loved by the locals. He doesn't seem to be dangerous. He's described as beloved, a gentle giant. Again, this is driftwood, but moss is growing all over it, so it's kind of a neat picture. You could interpret that as a monster, depending on if you had a few beers in the boat. So the next exciting thing was in 1973. The legislature signed into law a bill by State Senator Robert Harvey creating the White River Monster Refuge along the White River. The area is located between the southern point on the river known as Old Green Glaze and a northern point on White River known as Rosie. It is illegal to harm the monster inside the refuge. I guess if he's outside the refuge, you can. Whitey has never hurt anyone, you know. But anyway, this is the refuge, a game preserve, especially for the White River monster. So here is a map showing where Jackson County is in the state of Arkansas, and this is right here, the bend in the river where Mr. Bateman saw Whitey in 1937. And I believe when I was a little girl, my mother took me over to the Bateman farm. He had a pecan grove, and we picked up pecans from his farm. So there's a little bit of personal experience with this. It's no doubt about it, Whitey was good for tourism in the area. These mugs and pillows, they seem to depict him as kind of a large eel-like or snake, but also they have a White River monster hike So you can take a hike along the river and see where he's been sighted in times past and just enjoy the river and the outdoors. So everybody was trying to cash in. Jacksonport is a little town about 3 miles from Newport, and in the 1880s, steamboats made Jacksonport a thriving river port. During the Civil War, Confederate and Union forces occupied the town because of its location at the confluence of the White and Black rivers. Jacksonport put up signs, as did a lot of the little towns around, about the monster, trying to attract business. And so here you have, "Welcome to Jacksonport, home of the White River Monster." So they wanted to cash in on that. Jacksonport does have a state park, and the formation of the park began in 1961. It became a state park June 5th of 1965. The state park offers campsites, a playground and a pavilion, a swimming beach along the White River, and riverwalk trails are available for the visitors. Jacksonport also has the local festival, Port Fest. Port Fest has been going on for 70 some odd years, maybe 75. It's a pretty old festival, but they have cardboard boat races. And so this cardboard boat race is sort of monster-like, and apparently the theme of the boat competition this year was the White River Monster. So everybody should have had a monster boat to float out in the river there. But the Port Fest is a big event. They have music, they have a big car show, they have lots of food to eat, and it's really a fun thing to attend. But back to Whitey, nobody really knows what he looks like. So these are some artist renderings, some people that have just drawn things that they think might be what he looks like. This one looks pretty scary, lots of big teeth, but this is just their portrayal. Newspaper stories of Whitey appeared in Arkansas newspapers, plus lots of other states. New York, California, Florida, Tennessee, Texas, Nebraska, Missouri, Iowa, Connecticut, North Carolina, Arizona, and New Mexico, just to name a few. There are hundreds of newspaper articles about the White River Monster. There is so much information about him. It is amazing, and I just finally had to stop. But it is very interesting, but lots and lots of publicity and newspaper articles. Even our own local newspaper, the Baxter Bulletin, had at least 6 articles about the White River Monster. There have been books written about the White River Monster. These are by Keith Rommel, and he wrote The White River Monster and then The White River Monster 2 and 3. They are purely fictional, although some of the things might be a little factual. The imagery looks a little scary to me. They kind of are a bad reflection on our White River Monster. And I lived in the Newport area. I was born there, I grew up there, I graduated from high school there, and I don't ever remember being terrorized by the presence of a monster. Although the battle between, this is a depiction also, although the battle between man and monster will inevitably take place, this is a story that leads up to the discovery of what could be the creature that has eluded man for so long in Newport. You will take a journey through the present day and the past to learn of this creature's existence and what it is really up to. The ending may shock you. This is about those books written by Rommel. But at the very least, it will leave you in awe. Come discover a new breed of monster like none before and share my love of this story. So it is based on the legend of the White River Monster in Arkansas. Also, the White River Monster is featured in J.K. Rowling's writings as a magical creature whose spines are used as wand cores by American wizards. There you go. And this Matt Lamey wrote 100 Strangest Mysteries, and it's an amazing collection of weird and wonderful things. The range of entries is extraordinary, from the bizarre to the horrific, and from the spooky to the just plain confounding. Now, these books are more what I think of Whitey, a little more in line with what I perceive. He's sort of a town mascot. He was in the Christmas parades. He was featured on the cover of telephone books, you know? So we've got the kids who wrote the story. Here's the White River Monster, and then this is just river monsters in general, but Whitey is included in that. Whitey has been on television shows. The Mysteries at the Museum is an hour-long television program on the Travel Channel, and it features unusual and mysterious things, and they have done a documentary about Whitey. Also movies. The Lost Tapes, the White River Monster, the newspaper article about the film being made. The White River Monster, The Lost Tapes, was filmed in 2008 and aired in 2009. So things have been going on with White River Monster. We can go back to the 1850s to now. So that's amazing that he still is getting interest at this point in time. But the video or the Lost Tapes, I have watched it, and it's two friends that get a guide to take them noodling for catfish in the White River. The fishing trip goes bad when the group is, they say, attacked by the White River Monster. But do you know what noodling is? Familiar with it? Okay. Here's some people noodling. You get in this murky water and you reach in under brush and things to get this catfish, and you put your hand in its mouth and pull it out. And I wouldn't want to do it, but these people were doing it. But on the video, this guide, they're walking along the river, and the two guys are complaining. They're saying, "We've been walking for so long, you know, when are we going to find a good spot?" You know, and he goes, "Well, we just need to go a little further up here." So they come to this spot and they go, "This looks like a good spot. Let's stop here." And he goes, "Oh, no, there's something in there. No. We can't go in the river right here, you know," but they insisted. And so they did go in the river. Two of them did not come back. But in researching this later, they decided that the attack was not the White River Monster, that it was an alligator. Okay, so all of that to start to figure out, so what is the monster? What does he look like? So we are going to explore about a dozen different theories. And the first one is a Gulf sturgeon. Those are pretty big fish, and they could be up to 300 pounds. They look pretty menacing, and they might accidentally come up from the Gulf and get in a wrong channel, especially when all the areas are flooded. On the far left is a devilfish, and he doesn't look very big there, but the maximum growth is measured at the length of 17 feet. And he has a large body and a spiny tail. So, and like the teeth might look like some of the things that have been depicted or whatever. And the snakehead fish. He could be some sort of early snakehead. They were introduced in the U.S. They are invasive and they're very destructive species. Again, he doesn't look very long, but they can be quite large, and they also can leave footprints, since they can hop onto land to try and get to another source of water. The story of the size could be exaggerated, as most fish stories are. Another theory is a submerged boat. Yes, ma'am?
Yeah, do you know when they were introduced?
No, I do not. The snakefish? I don't. Submerged boat or log, according to local fisherman Tom Shiras. Some of you may recognize that Tom Shiras name, walking editor of the Ozarks. Shiras thought it could be an inverted hull which fills with gas from rotting vegetation and rises. As the hull reaches the surface, it becomes heavy so that it tips, releasing enough gas so that it once again sinks. It's a theory. Okay, the next is alligator gar. This photograph on the left was made into a postcard. This gar was actually caught in the White River. They used deep sea tackle to land this monster. He was 8 feet long, and a lot of people feel like either that type of fish or some of his brethren may have been the source of the legend of Whitey, the alligator gar. Then we have the White River sea serpent. He's at least 30 feet long that supposedly inhabits the White River. We actually have the White River monster, the White River sea serpent, and then I've also seen a reference to White River beast. I didn't do any research on the beast. But here's an excerpt from a newspaper in the early 1900s about the sea serpent. 5 fishermen were nearing their home landing from their 2 days fishing excursion. A sight met their eyes that chilled the blood in their veins. Even the stout-hearted commander of the crew held his breath in dread of the monster. Its appearance was truly terrible. What seemed to be a living monster was plainly visible. It was 12 feet long. On its head were formidable horns. In the center it was several feet wide, and the extremity of its tail was adorned by a bush. And as it rose and fell with the waves, the stoutest of the crew held their breath at sight of the terrific monster. After a few moments' delay and hurried consultation, they decided to capture it. They separated. They had 2 boats. One of the boats approaching from the south, the other from the north. They approached it warily with bated breath, each eye strained to discover a vulnerable point, each brave heart trembling as to the result. Nearer and still nearer they approached until all of a sudden, one fisherman made a bold dash forward and seized a horn of the monster. A shout of exultation and relief went up from each throat when they discovered the monster to be nothing but the skin of a defunct bovine that had caught on some trash which held it there. A very unfortunate ending. So it was just a cow that was caught in the trash, but it scared them anyway. So that was the sea serpent. Another theory is catfish. Catfish can grow pretty big. You know about Old Blue, the catfish of the Mississippi River. They sometimes get stuck in canal locks and underneath the bottom of barges, and they can weigh, 150 pounds plus, depending on how old they are, or they can get pretty big. Then this theory, the giant alligator snapping turtle, this could have been what was seen at Branson in 1912, and these turtles can live well over 100 years, sometimes 150 years, and they can weigh 300 or more pounds. So this could be a likely possibility. Another is the manatee. Though they may seem like cumbersome creatures, manatees or a sea cow can swim quickly and gracefully, and this would be the Florida manatee. Again, it would have to accidentally get in a wrong channel. Manatees range in size from 8 to 13 feet and can weigh 440 to 1,300 pounds. So it certainly meets the criteria of the weight. They have long, strong tails that power their swimming. They usually swim about 5 miles per hour, but they can swim up to 15 miles an hour in short bursts when they feel the need for speed. So, and the color of their skin and the texture of their skin, again, manatee could be a possibility. There are biologists and cryptozoologists who have come up with these theories. And the most likely, according to most of the professionals, is the elephant seal, the male elephant seal. Roy P. Mackel, he's a cryptozoologist, says that the White River monster is a clear-cut instance of a known aquatic animal outside its normal habitat or range. He thinks it's definitely a male elephant seal that wandered into the White River by coming up the Mississippi from the ocean. And they are a huge creature. They can weigh 7,500 pounds and be 16 feet long. It's the largest member of the seal family, and many of the characteristics, again, noted by the observers, like the molting skin, making tracks, because they do come out onto the sand, the sound that they make, and the bone protruding on the forehead all seem to match the creature's description. Male elephant seals have an enormous range, migrating every year some 7,000 miles. It's certainly not impossible that one found its way to Newport, but why? Given that elephant seals only live about 15 years, the same creature could not account for the sightings in 1915, 1917, 1937, and 71. Is there some special reason that several of these animals got lost and wound up in the White River? Nobody knows. While the existence of the creature is not controversial, most professional people feel that there is some creature in the White River, but the question has arisen as to identifying it with a known species. Joe Nickel is another biologist, and he's criticized the other guy's conclusion because he just feels that Newport, the White River, is out of the range of the elephant seal, so he goes with the manatee theory. Another possibility, and this is the final possibility, that Whitey is simply a large, unidentified fish. I'm sorry. So in summary, these are some important dates to remember. 1912 was the Branson thing, and 1915 to 1924, sightings that I didn't have a lot of information about. 1937, the Bateman thing, 1971, where the footprints were found, and then 73 for the refuge. And this is a YouTube video, Most Amazing Facts About the Legendary White River Monster, so you can watch that. It is impossible to know whether there really is a White River monster, but some of the eyewitnesses' reports do raise an interesting possibility. The 1912 sighting by the lumbermen working on the river south of Branson of a creature they described as a gigantic turtle is definitely worthy of note. So too is the 1971 report by David Jenks of a creature with a pointy bone projecting from its head, as well as other eyewitness reports that describe the monster as with a large hump with its head hidden underwater or as having a jagged spine. These various accounts, when viewed together, suggest that the monster could be a giant alligator snapping turtle. These giant turtles are some of the largest in the world, and they're found in the rivers of Arkansas and other southern states. Not only do they have pointy heads, they also have three spiny ridges running down their back, and they also can appear grayish in color at times. Could one grow big enough to be the White River monster? The largest one ever caught was a 403-pound specimen caught in the Neosho River of Kansas in 1937. It's thought that normal adults can reach weights of 300 pounds and ages of 150 years. The creature seen in the river below Branson was estimated to weigh 300 pounds, while low-end estimates of the weight of the White River monster are given as about 600 pounds. While it's a possibility, the real answer still remains out there, waiting to be unveiled. It's just like shows that you watch for an hour to try to figure out the conclusion, and then they don't tell you anything. Those who have encountered the monster have offered useful testimony, and there is remarkable consistency in the way that they describe the monster. There can be no doubt that a real animal has been observed. The recurrence of activity and the sightings of the White River monster have left a deep and lasting impression on the community of Newport and the community at large. Most scholars think there's some truth to the legend. Some townspeople believe that the sightings have been an elaborate plot to gain attention by farmers in the area. No one knows for sure. The monster has not made an appearance in recent years, but many of the people living around the White River still believe he is there. So that concludes pretty much my monster. I'm going to say a few more things about the town of Newport. Newport has been with a farming community, and then not things going up and down the river like it used to in a little bit of a decline. But Newport today is trying to revitalize. Residents passed a tax devoted to economic development. They're trying to improve the school district. 2 prison units were built down there, Grimes and McPherson, and that provided hundreds of jobs for the residents. The most recent thing that's happened in Newport is 2 of the 5 facilities approved to grow medical marijuana will be in Newport. Newport also has benefited from Arkansas State University Newport, a 2-year school that became a standalone campus of the ASU system in 2001. But the White River and the town of Newport right now is mainly, or the river is mainly tourism. Recreation, fishing, boating, camping, they catch bass and crappie and catfish. There is only one company that still continues to haul goods down the White River from Newport. I'm not sure the date, I think it was somewhere in the 60s. The Corps of Engineers decided to not dredge the river out anymore. And when they did that, then it became shallower and it was hard for boats to go up and down. So recreation it is. The river, fishing, just camping, enjoying the outdoors. These are some of my resources that I use, and it's by no means all of them. But it was very interesting doing all this research and study. So now, does anyone have a question? I'll do my best, or we might call on someone else to answer it. No question? Yes?
Diana, do you think the damming of the river had any effect on the monster going from the warm water to the cold water, the way it's downstream?
Probably, yeah. I think he probably prefers the warmer temperatures. And the White River down there being more murky, he can hide there if he needs to. I'd rather be in warm water than cold. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you so much.